Another race that you're remembered for is the 1973 National 500 at Charlotte. And you were telling me that you actually protested the finish of that race before the event started.
Yes, in fact, when I questioned Bill Gasway about the idea of protesting and all, he informed me that I had to do it 24 hours in advance in writing, and because of what it was, I couldn't protest just one car. I had to protest at least 4.
Okay.
And I had to give them the protest in writing with the $100 cash per protest accompanying that. So I had to give them $400 cash and 4 written protests. I wanted to be sure that Junior Johnson's car with Cale Yarborough was outrunning me legally, which he was outrunning me really bad on the straightaways, for the previous couple of races. I thought about it, and all of a sudden Richard Petty began to run quite a bit faster on the straightaways, and Hoss Ellington used a Junior Johnson engine, and that was a good third one, and then Wood Brothers were the big winner at Charlotte. Won so many times with David Pearson, but I'm thinking maybe they even won with somebody else besides David. Well, in fact, they did, because Donnie was driving for them when he won the 600 that year. So Wood Brothers, they definitely were big winner at Charlotte, and they were fast at the big track. So I felt like it wouldn't hurt them to go ahead and take my $100 and take their engine apart a little bit so it could be looked at. So that's how I got the 4.
Going into that race, it was a pretty big purse.
Yeah.
Because they were offering lap money.
Yeah.
What made you so sure that you needed to protest?
Well,
going into the event.
Now, it wasn't the idea of what race it was or what lap money or anything. It was the idea that I had become convinced that there were illegal engines, or at least one illegal engine, and maybe more than one, that I was running against.
Sure enough, Cale took the checkered flag.
Yep.
Richard finished second. You were third.
Mm-hmm.
Your car didn't take very long to pass inspection, from what I understand.
No, in fact, when the race was over, Bill Gasway said, we're going to tear 2 of these cars down. The other 2 had trouble during the race, and they've already gone home, so we're not going to tear the other 2 cars down. That was Hoss Ellington's car and Wood Brothers' car, and they're gone. So we're going to tear down Petty and Yarborough, Petty and Junior Johnson, and we're going to look at your car to make sure that you're okay. So you bring yours in, we're going to tear yours down first. And so we brought our car in and took the engine apart, and I let them look at everything they wanted to look at on it and put it back together, and said, okay, you passed inspection, so get out of the teardown room, and you're not allowed in here while we're doing, while we're looking at these other 2. And, I was a little bit resistant of that to begin with, because other people were allowed in there while they were looking at mine. So why shouldn't I be allowed in there at ones that I paid to look at? But anyway, they made me wait outside. The teardown went on for quite a while, and people began to get a little bit restless and making comments and so forth. And finally, probably 4 hours after the teardown thing began, Joe Epton came out and made the remark as he came through the door. He says, Petty's engine was way, way too big, and Cale's was a whopper. I thought for sure they'd come out and say, well, the engines were too big, and so they're disqualified. But instead they said, we're sending results to Daytona. We'll give a report tomorrow. And so I loaded up and went home, back to Alabama. The next day, I'm not sure how I got the word, but I got the information that NASCAR had said that the post-race inspection proved that the pre-race inspection was inadequate, but the results still stood.
Now, is there any way to describe your reaction to that statement?
Well, no.
on a family show?
No, certainly not on a family show. I was really, really irate about it. I challenged Bill France Jr. because by then he was running the thing, and it had gone to Daytona to be in his lap. He put me off and kind of brushed me off, and so I went and met with a friend of mine and asked, what kind of recourse I had. He said, well, it appears to me that if the next race gets run, you have no recourse. If you go run the race, which you're planning on running, the next race was going to be Atlanta. And he said, you're planning on running Atlanta, and if you go run the race without getting this resolved, you don't have any recourse. I said, well, what do I do? And he was into legal stuff and politics and everything, and he said, get an injunction against the race going on in Atlanta until this thing is resolved.
Wow.
So I had to really do some traveling around to do that. I finally found a judge, I think in Fort Myers, Florida, or Tampa, or somewhere that would write me the restraining injunction, and flew back into Atlanta, determined to do this, and then said, no, this just isn't right. I can't stop this race because this race, NASCAR racing still is so good and so important, and it affects so many other people. And so I just chose not to enforce the injunction.
So you had the paperwork in hand?
Yes, I did. And I'm not sure I had it in hand, but I had it. I had it at my disposal.
Now, you met with Bill Jr. that weekend in Atlanta. What went on in that meeting?
Well, I told him, that we were really working hard to race and race within the rules and to honor the regulations. And he promised me that he would straighten it out, and that he'd get rid of the skirting the rules like they were doing, and I accepted that.